Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm Park Howell, and today we will amplify our brand Bewitchery series, which is all about assembling your brand story using the proven story cycle system with an internationally acclaimed branding expert as we explore his new book, Assemblage, the art and science of brand transformation to help you transform your brand. Emmanuel Probst is global lead of brand thought leadership at Ipsos, and he's an adjunct professor at the University of California at Los Angeles, not to mention a Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author of his first book, Brand Hacks, and now, of course, his new book, Assemblage. He believes that brands can no longer force-feed us a plethora of products and services we don't actually need. To succeed, brands must transform us and the world we live in by creating transformative brands that combine personal, social, and cultural attributes. As I've often said, your brand narrative illustrates what you stand for, and it's so important to tell that story because it's what you stand for that actually makes you stand out. Emmanuel's background combines over 17 years of market research and marketing experience with a lot of strong academic achievements attached to it. At Ipsos, he supports numerous Fortune 100 companies by providing them with a full understanding of their customers' journey. His clients span across a wide range of industries, including consumer packaged goods, retail, financial services, ad agencies, and media outlets. Emmanuel holds an MBA in marketing from the University of Hull, United Kingdom, and a doctorate in consumer psychology from the University of Nottingham Trent in the United Kingdom. He also teaches consumer market research at UCLA and writes about consumer psychology for numerous publications. Today, you will learn how he guides his clients through the personal, social, and cultural attributes you need to tell your stories that not only sell products, but make a positive impact on the people and the planet that you serve. We explore the three-step assemblage method, why it's important to marketers, and how you can use it to shape your consumers' perceptions of you, your brand, and your offering. So please welcome to the Business of Story, Emmanuel Probst. Emmanuel, welcome to the Business of Story.
Park, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, I'm so happy you made it. You have been extraordinarily busy. So, as they say, a third time's the charm. And I'm glad we finally got to put this together because I love your book, Assemblage.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind words. And I'm delighted we have this opportunity to connect with you and your community today.
So, you've written a number of books on branding, brand development, marketing, and so forth, and you've got a PhD in this line of work, correct? So what was it? Can you take us to a moment in time, maybe when you were a young man, somewhere in the world where you found a great interest and passion in the branding, advertising, marketing world that has led you to invest so much of your time and energy here?
And money.
And money.
Thank you. Well, when I was a teenager, I was really fascinated with advertising and pictures, meaning I used to collect ads from magazines, particularly luxury magazines, and also I would do my own pictures. I would make black and white pictures, and I had a dark room. And so I've always been attracted to the light, if you will. And eventually, I was going to say I ended up in market research because when I was a student in the UK, I needed a job and I needed to keep the cash coming. That's the part of the story that's not glamorous. But the part that's exciting is I thought it was fascinating to listen to people and understand why people do what they do. And if you reflect on the last 20 plus years, that is really what has been keeping me up at night. Why do people do what they do? And how can we create better brands and better products that are more meaningful and more fulfilling for people. So that's, in a nutshell, the story of my life. And it's the conduit. It is the connective tissue between my role at Ipsos as a global lead for brand thought leadership and my role as an educator, as an adjunct at UCLA, and my voice as a writer, as the author of Assemblage, among other writing projects.
Where did you grow up?
I was born and raised in France, and I studied in the UK. I booked a one-way ticket on April 15, 2001. The ticket is framed in my living room. So it was a
one-way ticket from France to England, so you couldn't leave?
Yeah, which and so I didn't speak English at the time, and distances are, it's easier to travel these days, but back in 2001, it was a pretty big deal, if you will. And I never looked back. I mean, I will go to France from time to time for work and visit people, but I've never considered moving back.
I got you. Let's talk a little bit about this concept around the purpose-driven brand, because I was a big believer in it 20 years ago, and we were working with brands to get them there. And then it fell out of favor with me a little bit, Emmanuel, because it seemed like more brands were paying lip service to it than actually doing it. And they were trying, and so I maybe gave that whole idea of the purpose-driven brand kind of a black eye. I'm not sure. And then, of course, those that were trying to do it worked hard. If it's a organization over a certain size, you're talking about the Fortune 500 and whatever, it seems like, boy, if they're not already purpose-driven, it's really hard to make them purpose-driven. And if it's a little small company, maybe they're very much purpose-driven because they can do it that way, but they're not really making any impact because they are so small. So my first question to you in this whole idea around assemblage and assembling a purpose-driven brand, are brands really doing this?
Yeah, so just like you, Park, I'm cooling off on the buzzword of brand purpose. Yeah, I'll put it nicely. Look, here's the deal. 7-10 years ago, everyone jumped on that bandwagon. We need a purpose. We need a mission statement. This is our purpose. Fast tracking to today, number one, brands are accountable. They no longer get away with just claiming a purpose. They also must demonstrate this purpose. Number two, this purpose has to align with whatever the brand does. It has to be realistic. It has to be tangible. Keep in mind that when this whole craze of brand purpose started, we already had social media, yet people wouldn't talk back at brands, certainly not as instantaneously as they do so today. The consequences wouldn't be as bad. So first, brands must demonstrate brand purpose, whatever their purpose is. Two, it needs to be realistic, to align, to be tangible. And last but not least, it's easier, more realistic for smaller brands, for startups, to create a business around a purpose as it is for legacy brands to, I wouldn't say reverse engineer, but to adopt a purpose. In other words, a lot of smaller brands or a lot of brands starting today, they're built around the purpose, not even necessarily around the product. It's much harder when your brand's been around for 50, 60, 70 years and you built a business that candidly was not necessarily geared towards sustainability or economic recovery or circular economy or upcycling or diversity and inclusion and so on and so forth. It's very hard to reverse engineer things, for lack of a better expression.
A legacy brand that seems like they were built on purpose before purpose was cool. It's Patagonia. At least that's the one that stands out in my mind. Do no harm when you're out there on the planet, and don't buy our products if you actually don't need them, and that sort of thing. And some of the documentaries that they've made, they've really pushed the green apparel industry because their flagship operation in Boston was poisoning their own people, and they didn't even realize it from the off-gassing of the cotton that was stored down in their basement. And they're like, oh, we've got a real problem here, and they did something about it. Who are right at the top of your list of purpose-driven brands and the larger companies that you think model it well, that people can really learn from?
So to me, the fact that you mentioned Patagonia is interesting simply because we hear this example, and rightly so, we hear this example every week, if not every day. And while Patagonia is leading by example, it also shows how, as marketers, we are short on case studies of brands doing the right thing. In other words, Patagonia is anecdotal in nature, and that's because very few brands, if any, will be willing to give the business away to charities or to NGOs to combat global warming. And on the flip side, well, it's counterintuitive, or I will call it selling by saying no. But Patagonia by telling people don't buy this jacket, or Patagonia by no longer selling corporate gear. Yeah, Patagonia no longer will sell a sleeveless jacket to Morgan Stanley, what we used to call the Midtown Manhattan uniform. Well, by doing so, it turns out that they're driving lots of attention, which converts into store traffic, which converts into sales. So by telling people not to buy their products or only when people need them, it turns out that Patagonia ends up selling a lot more. So just to be clear, I have huge respect for the brand and what it stands for, and it is by all means the leading case study when it comes down to brand purpose. But those case studies, they are few and far between, right? And National Geographic is an interesting brand. You're asking me for other examples. National Geographic, which is a Disney property, is really built around this purpose of showcasing how wonderful the planet is. And a third example that comes to mind, a legacy brand that has successfully aligned with a purpose, is Unilever with Dove. And I'm thinking of a real beauty project. And initially, well, Dove was, guess what? Soap and personal care products to clean your skin. Just like another 150 brands out there. Yet, around 2015, 2017, Dove started aligning with promoting this real beauty project, which in a nutshell is, let us reveal your real beauty and you're beautiful as you are. Oh, and by the way, Dove as a product will help you reveal that beauty. And to me, that's such a wonderful example of, one, a brand that had to reverse engineer is a strong choice of words, but had to adopt a purpose even though it was not built around purpose. And two, Dove promotes a purpose that aligns with its products. Simply put, it makes complete sense for Dove that sells soap to tell people, I'm going to reveal your real beauty. And last but not least, it makes a real impact on sales and also a positive contribution to society by telling young girls, you're beautiful as you are, and older girls too, you're beautiful as you are, and you don't need all the filters and the Photoshop. So that, in my view, is tremendous success.
We're going to jump into your book in 1 minute. I've got one last question for you. In your experience, Emmanuel, is there a Goldilocks zone for a purpose-driven brand, meaning they're not so big that they can't actually make that transition into it, and they're not so small that they can do it well, but they don't really have an impact? Have you seen in your experience, in your work through your agency, kind of that Goldilocks zone? It's just right for a purpose-driven brand to have the impact it's looking for on the planet and people and so forth, but also make a profit in the process.
To be honest, I think you regardless of the size of your brand, you can make a positive impact. And that's going to be a good transition onto the book, which contains that brands can no longer just sell products, but brands must also make a positive impact on people as individuals and the world we live in. So here's what I mean. You can be a very big brand like Dove and you're doing the right thing. You're making money and you're also making a positive impact on people and the world around them. You can be medium sized, that is, if you're in the DTC business, or a brand that comes to mind is Tony's Chocolonely, which is a brand from the Netherlands that sells chocolates that is only sourced responsibly, and they have a program to give back to the farmers, and they have long-term contracts with the farmers, and so on and so forth. So Tony's Chocolonely is nowhere near Lindt or Ferrero in terms of revenue, yet it's much bigger than a small manufacturer next door. And it's really doing the right thing in terms of demonstrating purpose and making a profit. And then you can go very, very small. You can be an independent craft brewery and you're going to source your ingredients locally and you're going to produce locally and you're going to sell your product locally. And by doing so, you demonstrate brand purpose and you might have 3 employees and you might move 10,000 bottles of beer a year and 5,000 bottles, maybe, who knows, if you're getting started. And you demonstrate a purpose, and that purpose is just as important and as impactful, in my opinion, as what Dove does. That's because you contribute to your local community and you do something that's very tangible and relatable for your neighbors.
So let's talk about assemblage. Why the name assemblage? And I know it has to go with assembling a brand, but let's have you explain that a little bit for our audience here.
Yeah, it's a good transition. We're just talking about beer and an assemblage. So this word, this terminology is drawn from winemaking. That is, when you make wine or champagne or whiskey or bourbon or brandy or cognac, you do so by combining different samples, dozens, sometimes hundreds of different samples from different grapes and different barrels and different methods and different aging processes. And you pick and choose what is going to enable you to create a product that is unique, different, and that's the process of the assemblage. And what's important in the winemaker skill, which I think is a very good analogy for marketers, is, well, sure thing, you want to know how good, how unique the product is today. But most importantly, you need to have a vision. You need to develop a vision for how the wine is going to develop over time. When I say wine, once again, it applies very well to bourbon. So you can combine, assemble a bourbon today. That's fine. What's just as important and arguably more important is, how is this bourbon going to evolve 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the line? And the last point of this analogy, which applies very well to what we do in brand strategy, is it is not the guys with the most money that necessarily win. Of course, money, it helps a lot. And when you want to market a movie like Barbie and you have $100 million to market the movie, of course it helps. It's not just about the money. You have movies at $700-800 million that never make back the money because advertising is not enough. It's about making an impact. So that's where the terminology assemblage comes from. It's an analogy drawn from winemaking as applied to brand strategy.
Well, since you brought up Barbie, is Mattel, do you think, are they going to completely trump Lego in their content marketing? I mean, Lego's created some really great movies out there that I really enjoy watching, and I don't know that I'm going to go and see Barbie, but apparently it has its own social story, purpose-driven thing going on about that too. What do you think? Do you think that movie falls in line of a purpose-driven brand?
In a way, yes, whereby it promotes the strength and determination of women. And in its own fashion, it therefore makes a contribution to empowering women in society. So it's a little bit of purpose and it's a little bit of culture and it's being attuned to culture. I think that's what Mattel's doing very, very well right now. And interestingly, as many of our listeners might know, the brand suffered a lot over the last few years. So it's humbling, I think, for brand strategists. So 30, 40, 50 years ago, the brand was at the top of its game and was moving a lot of products. And then they went through a very tough time. And mostly because, and of course, I'm having to take some shortcuts, mostly because the brand, the doll was not so much culturally relevant anymore. And I think what Barbie is doing so well right now is the product, the doll, is culturally relevant again. And what Barbie is doing so well is it doesn't just sell dolls, it doesn't just sell doll houses. It is empowering young girls and women to transform, which is exactly the point of the book, to transform from who they are to who they want to become. And the reason why Barbie is doing so well, and I don't care if it's the doll itself, the movie, or whatever pink wallet they're selling at the store next door, but the reason why it's doing so well is because it supports people's identity projects from taking you from who you are to who you want to become.
So, what goes into this assemblage? If I'm a brand, and let's just say I'm a mid market brand, and Emmanuel, and I've been out there and I'm making some good money, I've been doing some good work, but I know that I could have a bigger impact in the world if I got a little bit more of my purpose dialed in so that my colleagues, would really embrace it, that I could attract and retain the best talent because we are more than just about what we make, but what we actually make happen and the positive impact we have in the world. What goes into assembling a purpose-driven brand like that from your book?
First, it's very important and very humbling to remember that the hero is the consumer, not the brand. The brand is here to support the consumer first in completing a mission, call it jobs to be done, if you will, and to support the consumer again in this transformation to take me from who I am to who I want to become. And again, just like we spoke about brand purpose earlier, well, first Assemblage goes well beyond brand purpose, whereby we look at how brands can contribute to your identity project and how brands can contribute to the world around you. I think the size of the brand, that's the good news for our listeners. You might be with a big conglomerate such as Procter & Gamble, or you might be with Apple, or you might be with an independent coffee shop that owns one or two locations. And no matter how big or how small your brand, and no matter how experienced you are or how green you are in the industry, you have this opportunity to contribute to transforming or to transform people and the world around them by doing the right things. And really, this book shows you how. It's a method on how to create brands that transform people and the world around them across three avenues. And the first one is your personal identity project. So it's who am I and who do I want to become? The second one is my world. My world is the community around me, my friends, my family, my neighborhood. And the last one is about the world at large. And that, of course, touches on sustainability, circular economy, and citizen and brand activism, among other topics.
And how do you define brand activism? Because I know it kind of means different things to different people.
The deal is brands and advertisers are no longer the dominating force, if you will. And what I mean is everyone now has the power to create content and even create brands and co-create brands with brand managers. Also, people, so put it this way, the bad news, so to speak, is brand strategists have to co-create with their audience. Brand and marketing professionals can no longer just dictate what the brand stands for to their audience. That's what's tough because you have to be willing to let go of control, of some control. Conversely, here's the good news. The public, and we see this in our Ipsos studies over and over, people trust brands to educate them, to provide them with information, and trust brands to make a difference in the world we live in, often more so than they trust universities, media outlets, and government agencies. If we look at a topic like privacy and security in technology, meaning you expect Google to keep your data safe and secure, for example. What's interesting is if you want to learn how to do a better job at protecting your passwords and protecting your data, we see this in our studies. You trust Google to educate you more so than you trust a university, government agency, the media, or your friends and family. So the brands have an opportunity to make an impact on important topics. That's what goes well beyond purpose, right? The brands have an opportunity to make an impact towards important topics such as sustainability, economic recovery, acquiring new skills, managing your money. That's another example. Bank of America has programs to teach people how to better manage their money. And those programs resonate better and are more widely adopted than some courses at university or whatever your mother is telling you to do. So that's what I mean by brand activism, that brand have the power and in many cases now the responsibility to take a stance and demonstrate their contribution.
It's interesting that you bring up Google. I don't know how many people really trust that Google is protecting their data and their information. I mean, that probably stems from Facebook because I know virtually nobody trusts Zuckerberg with their data and the surveillance marketing and so forth. And we won't even go down that rabbit hole, but I want to ask you, when you're talking about co-creating that purpose story with your customers, as an activist brand, can you give us an example? And maybe it's a brand that we don't normally hear of. I know you've got a lot of different ones in your book and your case studies, but can you give us an example of someone that has done a really good job of co-creating that story, maybe on sustainability or social initiatives that helps support and bolster their purpose-driven brand narrative?
Yeah, examples of co-creation, sometimes they are prompted and sometimes they're accidental. One that comes to mind is Sephora. So Sephora sells beauty products, retail, and online. And the reality is that you can buy makeup from Sephora and from another 24 other places. What's unique is Sephora developed this online community where customers, members, can trade beauty tips and can discuss, what type of makeup is going to work best with their skin tone and so on and so forth. And how to conceal acne, for example. And those are examples this is an example of a brand that goes beyond just selling products, which candidly, you can buy those products once again from pretty much almost anywhere else, is making an impact, is hosting, is moderating, is energizing a community of people to discuss issues and joys about their beauty routine. So I feel that's an example of co-creation right here, whereby Sephora controls the brand architecture, what it stands for, and what it wants to bring to market. And then the execution is a collaboration with the audience. And not to obsess with Barbie, but because the example is so successful. To me, that's another great example whereby Mattel can establish what the brand stands for and the persona for the doll, what message she should communicate and how empowering she should be. However, in terms of the execution, you see people wearing pink at movie theaters all around the country. And my guess is that at least 98% of them have no clue if this is actually the right shade of pink, if it aligns with the actual Barbie pink, the Pantone color that is dictated in the brand book. Nor do I, by the way. And I understand that this can make traditional managers and brand strategists cringe. Yet, what's important is to rally the community around the door, not to be dictatorial and try to police people on having the right color at the right time. So, here again, that's an example of a co creation of the narrative and of an audience harnessing the brand with some disregard for the brand playbook, but with the utmost respect for what the brand stands for.
In the marketing world, what is your experience? Let's just take it percentage wise of, say, we've got 100,000 professional marketers out there. What percentage of them are actually versed in this idea around purpose-driven brand and developing purpose-driven? And the reason why I asked that, Emmanuel, is because when I do my work out there and I'm coaching a lot of small, medium to very, very large companies, I get the sense that a lot of them are just like, hey, man, we got to get sales up. I got to get this thing out the door. I don't have time. I'm overwhelmed with all this stuff. The last thing I really need to think about is the purpose of the brand, because my purpose here is to make money for the brand. So this purpose thing has been around for a long time. It's been a couple decades now because I've been working in and out of it since. But I'm curious, has it actually grown in the marketing world?
Okay, here's the dirty secret. And again, I think you're right. Brand purpose is important. We can go beyond just brand purpose and think about brand strategy. So I would expand your question to say, do people care about what the brand is going to stand for in 3 to 5 years? And you were asking me what the percentage is like. And my answer is, at a cocktail party, 90% of people will tell you they care. When they get to their desk on Monday morning, we're down to less than 10%. And here is why. People are goal-setted, as you suggested, on performance, sometimes quarterly, sometimes monthly, sometimes weekly. And therefore, their obsession to keep their job and get promoted and make more money is to drive traffic to the store or the website this weekend and to obsess about, excuse me, to obsess about recency, frequency, purchase, and CLV, and building the basket and profitability and return on ad spend and all this, what we politely call performance marketing. So please don't get me wrong, because this is very important. Revenue is so important. And what performance marketing does for you is provide you with very tangible metrics. And in that regard, it's extremely valuable. The reason why people pay less immediate attention to the brand strategy is, one, because it's slightly more complex to grasp, but also because the dirty secret in our industry is most people will not be in that role in 3 years anyway. So the average tenure for a CMO in the US currently is around, I think, 18 months or 19 months. So your average CMO is going to care about brand strategy within the first 6 months. Well, I would say between 6 weeks and 6 months. So 6 weeks, within the first 6 weeks of starting the job, the CMO is getting a lay of the land. And then 6 weeks to 4 or 5 months, she or he is going to make some decisions. And after 6 to 9 months, we'll see, in all likelihood, some complacency, if you will, or complacency is a strong word, but less of an appetite for rocking the boat. So that's a long answer to a short question, but that is why, in my opinion, and in my experience, brand strategy is less obvious, if you will, is because no matter if you talk to a 20 years plus experience type of CMO at a Fortune 50 or talk to a marketing intern 6 months in at some random DTC startup with 12 people in a garage, what these two individuals have in common is they'll be out of the door in 3 years from today, possibly in 2, possibly in 12 months.
It's interesting. I have not heard that stat in a while about chief marketing officers lasting on average about 18 months. And Emmanuel, you think about that, that's about the time it takes to actually develop, launch, activate a campaign and then measure its effectiveness, because those things don't happen overnight. So often then it's a one and done thing. If that campaign is not successful, they're out the door moving down the road. And a thing like purpose really takes a long time. The owners of B, the CEOs, they've got to have a long view about this purpose, that yes, they can have some immediate impact, but they've got to be in it for the long run, no?
You're right. And it's hard for executives at all levels to have a long-term vision for the brand simply because people are goal-setted on short-term metrics, on driving traffic this week and driving sales next week. Yet, while performance marketing is important and very, very impactful, it is not a strategy. And what I mean by this is you can advertise to drive traffic and drive sales next week, but that's not what will make your brand stand out. That is not what is going to enable you to charge a premium. That is not what is going to foster loyalty. That is not what is going to encourage advocacy for the brand. And the point being that you should do both. That means you should continue to do some performance marketing because you need the business and you need to show near immediate results. And at the same time, you need to work on your brand strategy so that you don't disappear in a sea of sameness just because in most categories you have way too many brands out there that people can choose from in the first place.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? I mean, we live in a time in a land of abundance because we have abundant choices of who we want to buy from, who we want to work for, what movies we want to watch. I mean, TV, when I was growing up, you basically had 3 channels and PBS, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So how can brands use your book, Assemblage, The Art and Science of Brand Transformation, to really find that differentiator for themselves in the market?
And to me, that's the key. It is to create brands, to leverage the book to create brands that transform people and the world they live in. That is brands that go well beyond just selling toothpaste or bleach or sunscreen and bring something different to people, something that is meaningful and fulfilling to them. And ideally, you will not need to market to people as aggressively. You will have people rally around your brand because now your brand stands for something that is important to them. So in a nutshell, that's the solution. And that's how I believe and that's how I see that you build successful brands in the long run. Not because you have the best toothpaste that makes your teeth 4 times whiter than competitors, which, by the way, nobody can assess those claims anyway, but because you sell toothpaste in a tube that can be fully recycled, or you sell toothpaste by sourcing mint from sustainable sources as opposed to using chemicals, or because you have an employee program that people look forward to, or because you have history and the story of a founder. Maybe that's the case for Tums of Maine, for example, or because you produce the toothpaste locally instead of shipping the toothpaste from the other side of the world, and so on and so forth. I just think that to stand out And to endure the test of time, be profitable and successful in the long run, brands must bring something different to the market. And something by different, I mean something that is meaningful and fulfilling to people, and something that make people feel not just good, but better about themselves, and make people feel better about the world around them.
In this day and age of truthiness and or fake news, which of course Donald Trump really championed out there and has a lot of people doubting a lot of large institutions and organizations and the media and the brand and everything else. You've got a chapter in your book about perception is the truth. What do you mean by that? And again, being around as long as I've been around, Rolling Stone had just the most marvelous campaign of perception and reality of what people perceived the readership of Rolling Stone magazine was, and then what the actual reality was, that it was a much more affluent group than people gave them credit for. There, in my mind, is an example of here's the perception. That's what they believe the truth is about Rolling Stone magazine, but here's the actual reality. So, they could overplay or outperform that anti-story people were telling themselves about the brand. Is that what you mean in this chapter? Or let's get a little clarity around that. Truth, perception is truth.
Yeah. Yeah, perception is the truth means that we construct our own truths based on our perception of the world and based on the information we have access to, and in a way on what we want the truth to be. And all politics aside, this chapter you are referring to zooms in on fake news and why do they propagate as well as they do? Why do fake news catch on as well as they do? And in marketing, coming back to marketing, what really matters is how people perceive the brand, not what the brand and product really are. And in many categories, there is no way you could differentiate the product just based on a blind test. If you think about light beer, for example, if you think about bleach, if you think about vodka, have at it to tell me the difference between Miller Lite and Bud Light, or to tell me the difference between Clorox versus Target's Up and Up, or to tell me the difference between Smirnoff versus Grey Goose versus Kettle One. It's about the perception we create for the product and the reason why Belvedere vodka, that is a LVMH product, can charge more and looks more premium than maybe New Amsterdam. That's because Belvedere vodka facilitates this transformation from who I am to who I want to become. If you look at their latest ad, we see Daniel Craig, and he's retiring as James Bond, and he starts the ad. He wears a white suit and very proper Englishman, and over the course of the ad, he transforms into who he really wants to become. That is a more progressive and I would say metrosexual individual, more out there, definitely a lot less public school than the traditional James Bond. And once again, in this ad, you see the product a few times, but it's not overwhelming. What's important is what the product enables you to be, who the product enables you to become. So that's perception. There is nothing in this ad about Belvedere tastes better than Grey Goose because nobody knows this. And if we want to be very honest with ourselves, nobody cares.
Nobody cares. Does it go back to that idea of at the cocktail party drinking Grey Goose? 90% of the people say, yes, I love their purpose. But once they get back to the office on Monday, they're like, whatever.
Well, not to mention that it is often an ingredient. So the vodka, the flavor is going to be impacted by the glass and the ice cube and the mixer and the lime or lemon or orange or what have you. And I mean, by the time you mix vodka with anything else, there's just absolutely no way you can tell which one is which, right? So that's what this chapter, Perception is the Truth, that is what the chapter is about. It starts, as with all chapters, it starts with a deep dive into consumer psychology, although I make it very, very approachable for the reader to understand why do fake news catch on. And then we look at how does this apply to marketing? How can we create brands that are transformative by creating perception for the brands? And then we look at examples of brands that do so successfully.
So let's kind of wrap up around this idea of your three-step assemblage method, how brands can transform me. And when you say me, you mean me, the consumer. The consumer is making a
Correct.
decision on, I want to buy this brand because I'm actually going to get some sort of transformation out of it. How often does a consumer actually think that?
Well, it goes the other way around. Is I want to become blank, and therefore, what is the brand that's going to take me there? Or sometimes, as a brand, you can prompt that transformation. So if we go back to bleach, to your point, Park, it's unlikely that people spend even 5 minutes of their day, even 5 minutes of their year thinking about what brand of bleach they should buy versus another. Now, when Clorox steps in with an ad to showcase that Clorox will help you take care of the elderly, Clorox helps keep hospitals clean and safe. Clorox is going to help with keeping your house clean and safe and secure for your family. Now Clorox prompts me to become the hero for my family. I'm not just cleaning my kitchen. I'm not just buying bleach here. I'm not just killing germs. Clorox is empowering me to take care of my grandmother by cleaning her bathtub properly, which is particularly important because she's so sensitive to viruses. And Clorox is enabling me to keep my kids safe and my dog safe, and so on and so forth. So the brand has the power to prompt this message and to trigger this transformation. And I think it's particularly compelling in the case of Clorox because bleach is a particularly functional product. And what I mean by this is bleach cleans your kitchen. Here again, in marketing, we very often talk about Louis Vuitton and Ferrari and Apple, and yeah, sure, that's cute. However, all those brands are emotionally loaded. They elicit a lot of subjective responses. As such, they can charge huge premiums and therefore spend more on advertising and on building perception. It's much harder when you sell bleach. To put it very simply, the margin on bleach is much lower than it is on a Louis Vuitton bag. You don't have the same opportunity to create the dream at Clorox that you do at Vuitton. So, my point about Clorox is it demonstrates how a brand that is a product that is highly functional, utilitarian in nature, and candidly not necessarily very exciting, how this product can be empowered. Well, we can accent the meaning of the product and the transformation the product can facilitate for the consumer.
So in that case, that example, you've got how Clorox could transform me by having a cleaner home, transform my world, impacting my grandmother and other places like that. And then you also said how brands can transform the world. So it sounds like you're just building, these concentric circles out.
Yeah.
First me, then my world, and then the impact in the world at large.
Yeah. And that is impact in the world at large. Of course, it has to do with purpose, sustainability, ESG. That's important. And beyond that, this opportunity to educate people. If you think of Alo Yoga, which is a brand of athletic gear based here in Los Angeles, look, the last thing we needed is yet another brand to sell us athletic gear. Don't we have enough with Nike and Adidas and everyone else? So what they do is they also host classes and they also help you stretch and they also connect you to a community. Nike does this with their running club. Lululemon does this also with some classes in store. So that's another example of a firm that, of course, they're here to make a profit, and they should. We're selling yoga pants, and they're not cheap, by the way. And how do we do so? Through the demonstration of the benefit of the product. We are teaching you new skills. We're teaching you yoga. We are bringing you, fostering a community. You're going to make new friends at the store. Oh, and by the way, on your way out, you should buy some yoga pants from us. That's such a positive way to do business. And in that regard, that's how the book is optimistic and empowering. And what I mean by this book is for everyone in marketing and market research, in brand strategy and advertising. It's for everyone, whether you are a Fortune 50 or a startup. It's for everyone, whether you're a 20 plus years experienced CMO or a 6 months in intern. And it's a book to empower you to make a difference in the boardroom and with your associates and with your clients. And I think that marketers now have, it wasn't the case 40, 50 years ago with Don Draper, but today marketers have an opportunity to make a positive impact on the world. And I want to help you seize this opportunity.
That's awesome. Emmanuel, where can people learn more about you and get your book?
Thank you again. So my name is Emmanuel Probst, and people can connect with me on LinkedIn. And again, the book is, of course, it's available at Barnes & Nobles and plenty of places, and of course on Amazon. And it's the easiest way to find the book on Amazon. And again, the book is called Assemblage, The Art and Science of Brand Transformation.
Awesome. Emmanuel, thank you so much for being here on the Business of Story. I truly appreciate it.
Park, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this connection with you today and with your community.
Absolutely. It's a great book. I've read it, folks. I've been through it, and I've read a lot of these books about purpose-driven brands. Emmanuel shares a lot of incredible insights in there and actionable steps you can take right now. So maybe you're a startup and you know you've got this great product, service, widget, whatever, and you're going to take that to market, but you want to stand for something bigger. You know how often I preach that your brand story is not about what you make, but what you actually make happen in people's lives. Get the book. If you're a mid-market company and maybe you are looking to make that transformation over to a purpose-driven brand, or maybe you're already there, but you're not doing a very good job of telling that story and you know it, get the book. He gives you lots of examples on how you can start doing that. And by golly, if you find yourself in a large corporation and you're really trying to push and you've got some headwinds there, one of the things that I found the best way to start is internally. Get some internal social initiatives, sustainability initiatives going. Demonstrate the impact that they can have on camaraderie and team building and so forth. Or maybe attach it to one of your campaigns as you reach out. Demonstrate to the leaders that be that you can have a real impact in this world if you focus on what is that overarching purpose of the brand. No matter where you find yourself, get the book, check it out, and I wish you the best in really identifying, articulating, activating, and getting people to embrace your purpose-driven brand stories. So tell that story on purpose. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Park. Thank you, everyone.
I can help you and your team excel through the stories you tell. And I got lots of ways of doing it. Our in-person, virtual, and hybrid mastery courses. You can bring me in as a keynote speaker. And I even have a do-it-yourself storytelling training just for you and your people. If you want to learn more, send me a note at park@businessofstory.com or check out our ABTs of Agile Communications quick online course at businessofstory.com/ABT. Hey, and if you liked what you learned in this episode, then please share it with someone you know who needs to transform their brand. And certainly don't be shy about rating and reviewing our show on iTunes. It helps us be heard out there. Join us next week as we continue the Brand Bewitchery series with Chapter 7 called Journey, How to Increase Customer Engagement Through the Stories You Tell. Darius Holbert composed our theme music, Caden Howell edited our show, and Marissa Hill guides our marketing. I'm here to remind you that as you grow as a more confident, persuasive, and influential communicator, that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that one fantastic. Thanks so much for listening.